Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sonia Rafika, and my partner is Tasya Kusuma Kartika. We are from Group 2, and we will discuss about chapter 5, which is value, ethics, and character. So I will start the first slide. So this is the introduction. In chapter 4, we examine many facets of power and its use in leadership. Leaders can use power for good or ill, and leaders' personal value and ethical code may be among the most important determinants of how that leader exercise the various sources of power available. This aspect of leadership needs closer scrutiny seems evident enough in the fact of the past decade's wave of scandals involving political, business, and even religious leaders who collectively robbed trust in both our leaders and our institutions. Even in purely economic terms, in 2010, the Association of Certified Fund Examiners estimates that businesses around the world one lose $2.9 billion every year to fraud the activity. So move to the next slide. So this is the leaders and doing the right things. Leaders face dilemmas that require choices between competing sets of values and priorities, and the best leaders recognize and face them with a commitment to doing what is right, not just what is expedient. Next slide will be explained by my partner.
And next slide, we'll talking about value. Values are construct referencing general behavior or state of affairs that are considered by the individual to be important. Value are learned through the socialization process and they become internalized and for most people represent integral component of the self. It's important for a leader to realize that individuals in the same work unit can have considerably different value, especially because we can't see value directly. And this is table 5.1. And in this table is some of the major value that may be considered important by individual in an organization. And the instrumental value found in the table refer to modes of behavior, and the terminal value refers to desire and state. For example, like some individual value equality, freedom, and comfortable life above all else. Other may believe that family security and salvation are important goals.
In terminal values, there are an existing life, a sense of accomplishment, family security, inner harmony, social recognition, and friendship. While in instrumental values, there are being helpful, honest, imaginative, logical, and responsible. So this is about the moral reasoning and character-based leadership. So moral reasoning refers to the process leaders use to make decisions about ethical and unethical behaviors. Value play a key role in the moral reasoning process because value differences among individuals often result in different judgment regarding ethical and unethical behavior.
And this is the ethical dilemmas. Rushworth Kinder has identified 4 ethical dilemmas that are so common to our experience that they are served as model of paradigm. The first is truth versus loyalty, such as honestly answering a question when doing so could compromise a real or implement promise of confidently to others. And the second is individual versus community, such as whether you should protect the conventionally of someone medical condition when the condition itself may pose a threat to the large community. And the third is short-term versus long-term, such as how a parent chooses to balance spending time with children now as a compared with investment in the career that may provide greater benefits for the family in the long run. And the fourth is justice versus mercy, such as deciding whether to excuse a person misbehavior because of extensive circumstance or confession that he or she has learned a lesson. And this is
So,
yes,
okay. So this is the three principles for resolving ethical dilemmas. The first one is an ends-based thinking. So it's often characterized as do what's best for the greater number of people, also known as utilitarianism and philosophy. It is premised on the idea that right and wrong are best determined by considering the consequences of results of an action. The second one is care-based thinking. Care-based thinking describes what many people think of as the golden rule of conduct common in some form to many of the world's religions. For example, like do what you want others to do to you. In essence, this approach applies the criterion of reversibility in determining the rightness of action. The last one is the third principle. The third principle is rule-based thinking. So rule-based thinking is consistent with Kantian philosophy and can be characterized colloquially as following the highest principle or duty. This is determined not by any projection of what the result of an act may be, but rather by determining the kinds of standards everyone should uphold all the time, whatever the situation.
and this is the fourth particular biases that can have a perceptive and corrosive effect on your moral decision making. The first is implicit prejudice. Although most people purport to judge others by their merits, and research show that implicit prejudice of the distort their judgment. The insidious nature of implicit lies in the fact that people are by nature unconscious of it. And the second is in the group favorites. Most of us can readily point of numerous favor and kindness we have shown toward others and understandable regard such act as indicator of our own generation and kindly spirit. Next slide. And the third is overclaiming credit is yet another way we may fool ourselves about the moral virtue of our own decision making. And in many ways, we tend to affect the quality of our own work and our contribution to the group and terms to which we belong, and conflict of interest. Sometimes, of course, we may be conscious of potential conflict of interest as when you benefit from recommendation to someone else, such as getting a sales commission for something that may not be in the consumer best interest.
So this is the three main components in moral potency. So the first one is moral ownership. Moral ownership is a felt sense of responsibility not only for the ethical nature of one's own behavior, but also for one's commitment not to allow unethical things to happen within their broader sphere of influence, including others and the organization. The second main component is moral courage. This is the fortitude to face risk and overcome fears associated with taking ethical action. The third one is moral efficacy. It is the belief or confidence in one's capability to mobilize various personal, interpersonal, and other external resources to persist despite moral adversity. So this is the character-based approaches to leadership. So some people might consider the phrase ethical leadership to be redundant of folio, and his associates have defined ethical leadership as having two core components. The first one is the moral person and the moral manager. The moral person is seen as a principled decision maker who cares about people and the broader society. More than being just moral people, ethical leaders are moral managers who make ethics an explicit part of their leadership agenda by communicating an ethics and value message by visibly and intentionally role modeling ethical behavior.
And the next is servant leadership. Servant leadership has been since 1917 described a quite different approach to leadership than that derived from a bureaucratic and mechanistic view of organization wherein workers are truth of the mercons and mission and authentic leadership is grounded in the principle found in the familiar adage to think ourselves to be true. Authentic leaders exhibit a consistency among their value, their beliefs, and their actions. Authentic leaders have strong ethical conviction that guide their behavior, not so much to avoid doing wrong things as to always try to do the right things, including treating others with the respect and dignity.
So this is the 10 characteristics are often associated with servant leaders. The first one is listening. Listening, while all leaders need to communicate effectively, the focus is often on communicating to others. But servant leadership puts the emphasis on listening effectively to others. The second one is empathy. Empathy is a servant leaders need to understand others' feelings and perspectives. The third one is healing. Servant leaders help foster each person's emotional and spiritual health and wholeness. The fourth one is awareness. Servant leaders understand their own values, feelings, strength, and weakness. The fifth one is persuasion. Rather than relying on positional authority, servant leaders influence others through their persuasiveness. The next one is conceptualization. Servant leaders need to integrate present realities and future possibilities. For a site, servant leaders need to have a well-developed sense of intuition about how the past, present, and future are connected. This next one is stewardship. Servant leaders are stewards who hold an organization resources in trust for the greater good. The next one is commitment to others' growth. The ultimate test of a servant leader's work is whether those served develop toward being more responsible, caring, and competent individuals. The last one is building community. Such individual growth and development is most likely to happen when one is a part of a supportive community. Unfortunately, numerous factors like geographic mobility and the general impersonal nature of large organizations have eroded people's sense of community.
And the next slide is the roles of ethic and value in organizational leadership. According to the book, there are 4 general categories of attitude and behavior. The first one is interpersonal behavior. They show care, concern, and compensation for others. They were hardworking and helpful. They value their relationship with others, working effectively to maintain and sustain them. And they tend to focus on the positive rather than the negative and accept other failures. And the second is basic fairness. A specific quality of their interpersonal behavior was manifest in the fairness to others. They weren't only often to input from others, but effectively sought it, and they tend to offer explanation of decision. They treat others respectful, never condescendingly, even in disagreement. And the third is ethical action and self-expectation. They held themselves to high ethical standards and behave consistently in both their public and private life. They accept responsibility for and were open about their own ethical failings, and they were perceived as honest, truthworthy, humble, and having a high integrity. And the fourth is articulating ethical standard. They articulate a consistent ethical vision and were uncompromising toward it and high ethical standard it implement. They held other ethically accountable and put ethical standard about personal and short-term company interests.
So the next one is about creating and sustaining an ethical climate. Sorry. So the first one is formal ethics. Sorry. So formal ethics policies and procedures. It sometimes said that you can legislate morality, and the same may be said about legislating an ethical climate. Nonetheless, certain formal policies and procedures are probably necessary, if not sufficient condition for creating an ethical climate. This includes formal statements of ethical standards and policies, along with reporting mechanisms, disciplinary procedures, and penalties for suspected ethical violation. The next one is core ideology. A core ideology is basically an organization heart and soul. It represents the organization purpose, guiding principles, basic identity, and most important is values. The next one is integrity. The core ideology cannot be a mere set of boredom flags or others exhortation to behave well. The core ideology must be part of the fabric of every level of any unit in the organization. Just as personal integrity describes an individual whose outward behavior and inward values are congruent and transparent. Organizational integrity describes an organization whose pronouncements and congruent with its public and private action at every level and in every office. The next one is okay, maybe Tasya, you can continue.
And the last slide is about creating and sustaining an ethical climate. The first is structural reinforcement. An organization structure and system can be designed to encourage higher ethical performance and encourage unethical performance. And the second is process focus. There are also need to exploit concert with process, not just the achievement of tangible individual, teams, and organizational goals.
I think that's the last slide of our presentation. Thank you so much for the attention. Is there any question?